So it is Thursday night. We are going to continue on a series. I believe it's 5 Thursdays in a row. And we're going to do a topic that I am very, very excited about for a variety of reasons. It's fun. The topic really, in some ways, is thanks to Lynn. Lynn got excited by something I said or did or whatnot, and kind of threw down the gauntlet of doing a series on Satan and Judaism. I'm really excited from the beginning for two different but related reasons. One is I do love the topic. I think Satan is way cool to give a technical response. I think that looking at different images and stories about Satan give us a neat opportunity to try and understand what those stories are about, why we have them, what need they fill. And second, because Satan is a straightforward example of tracing out the evolution of an idea. And I haven't quite decided how far we're going to go with tracing out that idea, but we could bring Jewish Satan all the way into the 20th century, and if I thought about it, probably even the 21st century. Couple pieces, real simple. First, I have added to the Or Shalom website in a very low-tech but accessible fashion a page for our class. So if you go to the Or Shalom website, which you should now see, if you click on education, the bottom choice on the menu is Satan and Judaism with Rabbi Meltzer. It's the only one that says with Rabbi Meltzer, because when I first put it up there as Satan and Judaism, it looked a little funny on our website. So this gave me a chance to qualify it a little bit. If you click on Satan, whatever I just said, Satan and Judaism with Rabbi Meltzer, it'll pull up this sheet. For some reason, it's not so clear. At the moment, the only links that are live are the link to today's short source sheet, which we'll look at together, and the link to the bibliography. This actually is only a partial bibliography. For those who are interested in any of these articles, I'm happy to share these articles. I have really, really enjoyed prepping. And in fairness, tonight's the only night I'm fully prepared for. So there's a whole lot of additional information that's here and that's waiting in the wings for me to take a look at. And I am trying to make it all accessible to you. Any questions about where this material is found or how you can access it? Nice. It's also absurd. I want to just put, not that the study of Satan is absurd. It may be at times, and that's fun to think about. But the amount of materials, if you look at the source sheet for tonight, it's a little bit of a larger font. I think it's 14 point, but it's a 14-page source sheet for one session. And so there's a far more there than we're going to get through. And I just, I would love for the conversation to not only be contained tonight. I will certainly be done by 9. I'd rather be done by 8:30, but we'll see what happens. And I would love for whatever conversation we have tonight and the 14 pages plus the bibliography that you already have, I'd love for the conversation to continue. Whether it's just because seeing you at the synagogue or if you actually make time outside of it, because there's a lot of stuff that we're not going to cover. And I'm not positive. You'll find out for sure next Thursday night, the 13th, if I'm going to stick to the way that I have organized it according to it's in the Devar and whatnot, doing biblical stuff tonight, doing Talmudic stuff, doing Midrashic stuff. I'm sorry, doing biblical stuff tonight, doing Job next Thursday, then Talmudic, then Midrashic, and then Zoharic, Sitra Achra stuff. I may rearrange that a bit by topics, but it'll be reflected on the source sheets when they come up, and all the rest. I want to take at least a minute before we jump into the text and think about Satan in our own experiences with Satan, or our own sense of what we're talking about when we talk about Satan. And I don't want to take a ton of time because time is precious. And for everybody who has their camera off, I want to encourage you to have it on. It really makes it feel much more like a class and a conversation together. Now, if there's a reason why you can't, Morris, we don't mind you cooking. But my preference, my urging is to have cameras on so that we can feel much more that we are studying together rather than, I'm talking to a bunch of names on my screen. So you all are here, which is lovely. But tell me, when I say Satan, tell me either what you think very, very briefly, please, and if there's some storyline or plot line or characteristic or some other comment, I want to kind of put it out there. It'll be fun to see, I think, how much of what we study together looks like what's popped into your mind, either when I say Satan or Satan in Judaism. And in fact, I'd encourage you, maybe I'll leave an email out tomorrow, some prompting questions to do your own writing, whether it's more journaling, there won't be homework, but we'll go from there. Anybody want to start? What you think of when I say Satan or when I say Satan in Judaism?
I can.
All right, Marvin gave me the devil. Good. I think I missed another chat too. Etty?
Yes, I think of evil or something that is a force, like a devil on the shoulder, something that like a mesite.
Nice.
The word, yeah.
Sorry, let me cut you off. Good. Yeah, so Marvin gives us a word, devil. We'll talk about the etymology and where that word comes from and how it becomes associated with Satan.
Rabbi?
Etty gives us some kind of power. I don't think she said pushing, but I'm going to pushing us towards evil or bad choices or some such. I saw another hand pop up briefly. Was that Maria? Oh, Davin?
I had prosecutor.
Nice. So we're going to look at where that comes from. We'll actually get there, I think, a little bit tonight, but that'll be more of next Thursday. Elisheva?
We pray every evening, Hashkiveinu, and we always say, protect us from Satan, from Satan. So that must be something very bad if we're asking from God to be protected.
Nice, and that's in a list of things. So Satan there is in a list of a variety of things that we want God to protect us from. Everybody should look at it. Somewhere in the low 140s in the Sim Shalom for weekdays. I can give the exact page. And maybe point it out tomorrow night. Love to see everybody in shul tomorrow night. Al?
I guess I have a very different view of that, and maybe because of my lack of Jewish knowledge. But I certainly think much more of Christianity and punishment in terms of Christianity than I think of Satan really existing in Judaism.
Outstanding. So one of the things to think about is a non-Jewish, image or association. Good. I think part of Lynn's excitement and part of what prompted me to do this, at least a piece of it, is, Al, exactly your response. Like, what does that have to do with Judaism other than, maybe it's Satan that makes Christians persecute Jews? I don't know, but what that has to do with Judaism, we're going to spend time figuring out. Gene, did you want to say something? You looked getting my attention.
Just by a demonic energy, I don't know.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Getting possessed by a demonic energy, or does that sound too Christian, right?
Say that one more time. I almost heard it.
Like a demonic energy.
Oh, good. So similar to Etty's force, but making it explicitly not just evil, but demonic, which gives it a sense of supernatural, and what goes with it. I like it. I think we may have to do another course on demons, by the way, kind of starting with Satan, but demonology is a whole other piece that we're going to do. Lynn?
Yeah, well, in Christianity, Satan is a person, a fallen angel, Lucifer, who is the proprietor of hell. And so that's all just, it's all, there's a whole drama to Satan.
Nice. And part of my question or prompt was about some of those storylines, and Lynn gave us, I think, 3 or 4 of them there. So Satan as fallen angel, Satan as I lost the word in my head that Lynn used as it relates to his relationship of being in charge of hell. You had another piece or two there of kind of the Satan narrative as we generally experience it in Christianity. What am I missing? Fallen, hell.
I said his name was Lucifer.
You gave me Lucifer. Yeah, so we're going to look a little bit at Lucifer and fallen angel stuff. Nice. Maria, I saw your hand go up. You're muted. Maria, you're muted.
Got it. So I agree with Lynn about the Christianity belief of a fallen angel, but I also think that the stories about Satan or the knowledge of Satan is to teach people not to make the wrong decision. You know, you have the free will, and you can either go right or left, and it can get really ugly at whatever level. So you can become devilish, evil. You know, there's all these words that I see on the chat that I think describe Satan. So it's more of a, you know, it could be a state of being or a state of choice of how to behave in life.
Good. And I have my own bias, or maybe it is just one of the ways, one of the perspectives from which I like to engage text is I'm very conscious of both what is the universe that's reflected in the text, what's in the background, or what do I think the world looked like to the person who wrote the story that I'm reading, for one, and two, what is the moral universe that's created through the text? That is, whether I think that the author is intentionally trying to preach or teach, or is just, even if it's not their intention, it happens. We're affected by what we read and are engaged with. So was it pedagogic? You know, in what ways is it moralistically instructive and so forth? And so understanding the Satan literature in that vein, I think, is good. I see I was a little bit behind in the chats. Allison threw out there about Yetzer Hara, the idea of the inclination towards evil in the tradition, and the idea of Dybbuk. Dybbuk's are really cool. If we get into demonic, again, a Dybbuk is not a demon, but if we get there, or just broadly do possession, we may have to. It's been about 22 years since I've done the what's the technical term? What I think of as the hokier side of medieval Judaism. So some of it is there. Did somebody else put a hand up? Yeah, Ellie.
There's like this kind of newer idea that Satan represents those who are persecuted by the church, more or less. It's like the Rosemary's Baby or the Church of Satan. These are kind of like newer perceptions. Satan just represents any group that has been marginalized by the church for going against the Bible in one way or the other over millennia or whatever.
Yeah, and look, that's a great one as we think about, perhaps what is being reflected in the idea of Satan, right? And whether or not, so I like that very much. All right.
Rabbi, I have one more thing. Is it,
Okay.
it could it be the opposite of God, Satan?
Oh, nice.
Like, in dark, yin yang, kind of like the opposite of.
Yeah. And so that actually brings me to the next piece, and then we're going to start reading some text together. And that is trying to figure out my biases and my curating what's in and what's out. So with very few exceptions, we're only talking about Satan. And I'm going to, it's not 100%, I got to be honest, but it's close to 100%. I'm going to avoid using Satan as an opportunity to talk about the demonic or to ask questions about the, a variety of demonic names and whatnot that appear in the tradition, Belial, Beelzebub, and other really cool stuff, and how they relate to Satan. The only time, I think, this is really for 2 weeks from now, but as of now, the only time that we will look at the Yetzer Hara as Satan is if the text makes it explicit. That is, we're not going to just say, well, because I can show you a place where Satan is compared to or is somehow synonymous with the Yetzer or the Yetzer Hara, that therefore everywhere it says Yetzer we're going to do. I'm going to say, nope, not in my class. We're going to, again, I have 14 pages of material for tonight alone, being as restrictive as I know how to be. So we're going to stick on the Satan is Satan and see where it gets us. I will just, as a side note, tell you that I have two favorite Satans. The second one was on television not all that long ago, and there's some problems with the series, and it's got too much misogyny if they really wanted to make it cute and playful and whatnot. But it was a great use of biblical and post-biblical Jewish and Christian material in it was called Lucifer, right? I believe. I don't know if it was produced for Netflix or who it was produced for, but I like it. I like it a lot. But my all-time favorite Satan, that one at least has a whole bunch of Jewish stuff within it, which I thought was really cool that the producers or the writers managed to bring in some Jewish midrashic material, some of which is distinct from the Christian material. But my absolute favorite is John Milton. If you're unfamiliar with Paradise Lost is a genius literary creation. And I highly, again, maybe I'll have to put after this, maybe I'll have to make it to Readings with the Rabbi just because that's not Jewish Satan. That is absolutely Christian Satan, but a phenomenal book and worthy of deep, deep study. So much better than Dante, much better than a variety of other kind of classic Christian pictures of Satan. I'm also going to avoid, as fun as it is, a whole bunch of Christian titles for Satan. And again, I'm going to try to be very, very disciplined. So barring any question at the moment, we're going to jump in. I guess I might as well share screen because there's nothing else interesting that I have to put up on my screen. So that way we're all looking at the same thing. Hopefully you know how, if you don't want to look at this, to minimize it or to close it off and to stay focused on other things. And if not, tough, you'll deal. All right, first, Satan is, it is Hebrew, and it is a word. And so as we try to figure out not only who, but what, and I like where, sorry. We're going to do this in some flavor of chronology. So as opposed to a classic Jewish take that there is one picture of Satan and that all of these are painted at the same time, we're going to do a bit of chronological order and development. And I'm going to bluff a whole lot of the biblical material as if it came from the same moment in history, which is not historically accurate. But for the level at which we're engaging it, it's going to be fine. So I have split what I will call most of the Bible, a few sort of transitional pieces, and then late Bible. All right, and that will be where we go today, and it'll carry into next Thursday. So you could ask questions, and to the extent to which we can have the conversation about a more precise linear development of it, but I'm not so interested in it. So if you are, you're going to have to ask the question. So the first two texts both take the word sin tet nun, and use it as the first one is a place name, but use it as a noun, as a simple noun. The first one is from the story of Genesis. If for any of these, so I showed everybody how to get to the text from the Or Shalom website. Go to orshalom.org, click on education, and then Satan and Judaism with Rabbi Meltzer, and that will bring you to the large sheet, which one of the top links is the source sheet for the first lecture, and the very last link is the bibliography, and those are the only links that are active, and for some reason it doesn't look that way, but I'll deal with that during the week. The other website that I want to point out for those who don't know is sefaria.org. This is an outrageous digital library of Jewish learning. So if you want to, if you don't have the book in front of you, whichever book that it is, if you go to Sefaria and click over here on text, on Tanakh, you may have to click on text at the top. You could look at that story that I put up there, or that text is from Genesis chapter 26, relatively late in the chapter. And you could look at who's arguing with whom about what in that's there. I'm not going to always give context because we'll get through 3 times the number of texts if I just do it briefly. Some of them I've given context. All right. If anybody needs me to show you again how to do this, I'm willing to do it 1 or 2 more times in class, and I'm willing to do it as many times as necessary outside of class. Also, I noticed somebody put something in the chat window. I'm going to ask you not to keep chatting to me because the way my screen is set up, I'm not going to monitor the chats. If you want me, raise your hand and interrupt me. Yeah, Allison?
Can you just zoom in on this Word document a little bit for those of us who have smaller laptops?
In terms of making it larger?
Yeah, if you just,
Yeah.
Yep.
You bet.
Thank you. Much better. Thank you.
Yep. And I'd probably leave as much clutter off my screen as I can. All right, thank you for asking that question, Hassan. But again, I apologize that I'm just not monitoring the chats, and I don't have my TA sitting next to me monitoring the chats to interrupt me, so you all have to interrupt me as we go. So the first one is the name of a place, and the Torah tells us that it is called Sitna, the Satan place. It's not what it's called, but I like that, because they had an argument, a reeve there. Vayarivu gam alecha. So it has to do with wells, it's Isaac, but the name is reflective of what happened there. Different topic. It's what we would call an etiological tale in the Torah. It explains why this place called, argument place or dispute place or conflict place is called that. And the answer is because there was some famous dispute there with Yitzchak and. Okay? But we get that this word is associated with conflict, argument, dispute, something in that family of meanings, because the explanation for why it's called that is because there was a fight, that not a physical fight per se, but an argument or whatnot. Does that make sense? Okay, etiology, again, use of the term, nothing to do with a person, by the way. I mean, again, it's people who are fighting, but the term itself is in no way anthropomorphic. It's not anything human. It is just a name of a place, and the name is somehow reflective of that piece. Yes? And in a much later piece of literature, in the book of Ezra, it seems to be some kind of letter that is drawn up in the time of Artaxerxes, and it was specifically, right, whereas the first one, it I think is relatively neutral in the argument related to the well. That is, I don't think the name Sitna takes sides. Would you put that in the freezer for me?
Yes.
Thank you. See, that guarantees class won't go too late because I got Froyo waiting for me. I think inherent in the Ezra text is that word used in that context is against the Jewish people. Okay, so one of the things as we go forward, it's the association, and it's a later association in the book of Ezra between this term and the idea of conflict. Here, JPS translates it as an accusation. They like the word accuser and try to be consistent around it. But it is an attack, an accusation against the good Jews, as opposed to other people. And so here it is, that term in conflict against us, so to speak. Pretty good? So when we talk about Satan biblically, we are already in a space where somebody is being accused or victimized or somehow in that space, as trying to understand what's going on. The next one is from the story of Bilam with the great talking donkey. And here Satan is a verb. I'm going to jump down to the English, but just to show you, it's right here. I love using red for Satan too. It's just too much fun. I appreciate that when Ellie put together the graphics for it, we get kind of some Christian iconographic images. Oops, this should be red. So I will highlight it. I apologize that I wasn't so careful in making it. It's the long story. I hope you know the story. It is Balaam going to curse the Jewish people when apparently God doesn't want him to. There's some confusion about it in the story. Go, don't go. And he's on his faithful donkey, she-ass in JPS English. And there is an angel in the way with the sword that Balaam doesn't see, but the donkey sees. And there's a whole conversation about it. What's important for what we want is this angel that God has placed, or the angel walks himself, but that is there, is specifically there, lisatan lo, to somehow be opposed to be against, to be in conflict with Balaam, who's on his way to do what God doesn't want him to do. Okay, so a name of a place, a genre of letter writing, here as a verb. Again, all linguistically, being linguistically very, very tight from sin tet nun, from the same, this is the Satan word. Tiki didn't like that. Good? All right. Now, here's really fun. I told you we get to a little bit of devil. This piece that's here, if you go and click on the bibliography, I don't have the bibliography opened, but you'll see that there's actually a book by Forsyth that's in the bibliography. I don't have the title in my head. This is from chapter 5, and this is a quotation from the book. The Septuagint, that is the Greek translation of the Torah and most of the Hebrew Bible, here meaning in the story of Balaam, uses the Greek word endiabalein, pardon me for my Greek, whose root meaning is to set something across one's path. So side note, one of the ways we try to understand biblical words that we don't really know what they mean or that have a range of meanings is we look at what people thought they meant a long, long time ago. And so we might look at early Aramaic translations or other pieces to it. The Septuagint is a fascinating way to see how Jews in, maybe the 3rd century, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, depending on which book, how they read or understood the Bible in Greek. And here, the verb for what the angel is doing, being placed in Balaam's way, or in the donkey's way, is endiabolin, which means to set something across one's path, to be an obstacle or to get in the way of. And so one, that's interesting. That means that these early Jewish translators into Greek thought that that's what the verb lisatan means. It meant to be in the way, to be an obstacle, to literally be in the way, not metaphorically. And it is the Greek word from which we get diabolos. And so diabolos in ancient Greek is one who performs the action signified by that verb diabolein. That is to get in the way of. That's what the ancient Greek word diabolos. Diabolos is the one who gets in the way of. Despite the parallel progress of the word, and so that should be Satan, it just has to do with how it copied, and diabolos towards their invidious denotations. The episode of Balaam's ass shows that no necessary evil attaches to either if the path is bad and obstruction is good, right? So two pieces. One, here is the origin of diabolos, or the earliest piece in the Torah for diabolos related to Satan from the Hebrew. Pretty neat. And second, here, the thing that is there, l'satan lo, to be Satan to him, is a good thing. Right? Now, it's not a good thing for Balaam. That's why it's l'satan lo. Right? It's obstructing him. But Balaam is going somewhere where he's not supposed to go. This isn't something that's obstructing him from going to offer sacrifice at the temple or going to honor his father and his mother or some other noble path or pursuit. The angel of the Lord in Numbers is obstructing Balaam from doing something bad. So here, the association with the word is, it's not morally neutral here. The angel of the Lord is doing good by being a Satan, an obstacle, a diabolo, to Balaam. I think that's fascinating. Again, I like the connection to diabolos. It's pretty cool to see how the word from Hebrew is going to now jump and be important in Greek and whatnot. I made my John Milton comment already. And two, the question of, is this word bad, and is the personification of this word, bad or evil? In the Genesis example of a place name, it's not taking sides. It's just reflective of conflict or challenge. I think in the Ezra text, which is a relatively late text, I think it is that the thing that is Satan, there it's a letter that is a sitna, is against the Jewish people. I find that interesting. But here in the Numbers text, the thing that is Satanine, I'll make it a verb, is doing good. Right? So when we think about what is the purpose or what is this about, we are still in a space. We are still in a space where it's not evil, it's not tempting somebody to evil, it's not blocking somebody from doing good, right? In some ways, it's exactly the inversion, I think, of what we expect from the satanic. I like the adjective too. Yes, good? All right, still in classical biblical stuff. Now, here's really fun. I like it's fun. The term Satan, which again means some kind of conflict or obstacle, or we've looked at a range of meanings, is used to represent as some form of pronoun, maybe a metaphor, for a person. Again, we can go, if anybody stops me, we can look at the context of each of these. But David, in 2 Samuel 19, the top one there, he accuses the Bnei Tzruya of coming l'satan, to get in his way, to cross him, to obstruct him. Again, still, I'm okay with not worrying too much about the English, but he looks at a group and he says, why are you guys Sataning me? Right? So it's a term that doesn't that isn't only something that an angel of the Lord can do, right? Here, David is accusing a group of human beings of doing it. And again, it's a bad thing that they're doing because David certainly sees himself as on the path to good. But again, when we get to later literature, right, when we get to the cool stuff about Satan, Satan's not going to be a human being. And here we have David applying the category to humans. Yes, I'm making sense. I appreciate those of you who are nodding. Okay, and that's not a unique use biblically. In fact, it's a common one. It's neat that it's often about kingship, by the way. We could try and make a fuss about maybe there is some nobility reflected in the term, which is true in most of the cases, maybe. By the way, there are those, it's in the bibliography, I'd have to look at it to tell you which author, who want to make the word in all of these usages much more of a direct violence word. That is not just an obstacle or whatnot, but the kind of obstacle that could actually draw blood. Not just an argument, but a real fight. The angel of the Lord has a sword in its hand. He's not just there and even threatens that, to kill back in Numbers 22. And these are all military images too. Could be. First Kings chapter 5, we could take a look at the exact contents and so forth, but again, it's a noun, it's not a verb, and it is kind of like the category or maybe the fulfillment of the Hashkivenu prayer that Elisheva referenced, that the praise is that now I have no problems. What are my no problems? God has given this all around me. I am in this bubble of peace. Ein Satan ve'ein pegara. There is, no conflict, adversary, problematic obstacle. There is no Satan, and there is no, bad wound. There is no injury. There is no problem that's there. So here, the absence of the Satan or of a Satan or of is reflective of being a good thing. And I think, it falls into that category. So maybe this one isn't as clear as the others. The third one's my favorite. It's from a little bit earlier. These are not in order within the Tanakh. But David, who used to be fighting with the Philistine, fighting on their side, now they are concerned that he's going to be fighting against them. And so we have a conversation amongst the Sarei Plishtim, the leaders of the Philistine armies, and about what to do about David. And those who don't trust him, those who don't see him as the ally that he used to be, say about David, Hashevet Aish, V'yashov el mekomo. Send him back, that he should go back to his own place. We don't want him marching with us to battle because we can't trust him. And if he marches with us to battle, v'lo yeh lanu l'satan b'milchama, that he might become a problem for us in the battle, right? He might, rather than being an ally, he might be an obstacle or an adversary or something else. So similar kind of usage. But what's really cool is David gets called a Satan, or right? It's hard in English. It was mentioned before about Satan versus Hasatan, Satan for the Satan. So I don't know if David becomes, it's tough to use it as a proper noun. It's not that David gets called a Satan or that he might become a Satan to the Plishtim, but that he might become a problem or an adversary or an obstacle, or rather than an ally. It's right. That's the distinction. And I love that it's used about David, and they're not wrong. The people who are saying it aren't deluded. David, between you and me, I think David switched allegiance when he went to fight for the Plishtim against Saul, not when he came back to be with his own people, but that's not their perspective. I see some head rubbing, and I see no questions.
I have a question, Rabbi.
All right, that sounds like Marvin, but I can't see you.
That is Marvin. Yeah, you had mentioned a common usage. Are you saying that in current Hebrew they will use this term
No.
"satan" for an adversary?
I'm not saying they would, to be honest. I don't think they would, but I could be mistaken. It may be, but if it were used today in modern Hebrew to like everybody's ears except for my own, it would be used metaphorically, right? We in colloquial English make comments about devil, and if you were to call somebody devilish today in English, you wouldn't be referring back and using the ancient Greek term meaning an obstacle. You would be in reference to some variant of popular culture, Satan, or the devil, right? So my guess is if somebody were to use this as an expression in modern Hebrew, we'll get to, there is an expression that's still used, but that's going to be rabbinic, and we'll get there. I think that it would come from an association with a much later image of what Satan is, rather than the biblical usage of it. The author of this text about the Philistine army officers, generals, trying to decide if David is still a friend or if David has become a foe to them, they don't hear in their conversation, or the author doesn't hear when she or he writes this story, the later image that Satan is an angelic or demonic figure with superpowers, divinity, and all the rest. Okay? So I don't think you can use in English, Greek, or Hebrew, I don't think you can use the term today and ignore all of the history before, but I'm confident you could have used the term before it had those other meanings and not have it burdened by those other meanings, if that response makes sense. Did I make sense, Marvin?
Yes, great. Thank you.
Okay. So I couldn't prove that, but again, that makes sense to me in terms of understanding this term. Others? Now, don't worry. This is like the grammar lesson so that we can then go and write grammatically correct, dirty limericks or something. We're going to get to the sexy Satan. We're not there yet, but the teacher in me needs for it to be needs for us to understand where it comes from. I love this text. Given limitless time, we would spend even more time on this Solomon text. First of all, it's significant. Solomon, as distinct from his dad, is generally his grade, his moral grade in Kings is much better than David's moral grade overall. He doesn't make as many mistakes as dad did and whatever else. And so to have a story that starts Vayitanaf Adonai b'Shlomo is a big deal, I think. In some ways, Shlomo is the hero. He's not remembered that way. Just fascinating for a variety of reasons, not in Judaism. Right? The kingdom is remembered as David's kingdom that needs to be restored, not as Solomon's kingdom, and not in Christianity, which even though when one traces the genealogy of Jesus, Solomon is in it, David is kind of the paradigmatic king in both our tradition and their tradition. For historical reasons, I don't totally know. I don't have a good sense of why that is. If I were going to reorient the traditions, I think it would be nice to to think about Mashiach ben Shlomo and what that would mean and so forth, but that's not the way the tradition evolved. So here's a text where God is angry. Whole piece can be done about the association of this word and God being unhappy or angry. So it's not so much in the text that we've looked at, but we'll see it later, and it's there. Here we have half a chapter, 2/3 of a chapter, and I get the word 3 times in it. So It's not an accident. It's not like an author who puts too many conjunctions into a paragraph, or it's not like simply the name of the place that I periodically remind you that we're talking about the Colorado River as we go on in the story, because it's important that they cross the Colorado River. No, this is a word that to appear 3 times in a short text is, at the very least, I would call it a leitmotif, but it demands for attention to be paid to it. And here in this story, God's mad at Solomon. God says, for the sake of your father David, I will not do it in your lifetime. That is, rend the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. I will give your son 1 tribe for the sake of my servant David. And for the sake, in some ways, I feel like I'm answering my own question by close reading this text, by the way, but that's a different conversation. So God raised up an adversary. That's this first use. Vayakem Adonai Satan l'Shlomo. And that was a guy by the name of Hadad Ha'adomi. Red Hadad. I lost my place. As a Satan, again, a human being as an opponent, adversary, obstacle, something.
Hadad the Edomite, not Hadad the Red.
Oh, come on, that's fun. But thank you for being correct. He was actually royally red.
Kind of private.
He was royally red, but fun. Language is to be played and enjoyed. Okay. And so then as the story goes on, God's not finished raising up Satan's to afflict Solomon. He does it later in the story. You can read the story. The story matters, but the focal point that I want is angry God keeps sending out, just like angry God sent, there was a verb, not a noun, but sent an angel of the Lord to Satanize Balaam. Here, angry God is sending Satan's to afflict Solomon. So another one that God raised up was Ritzon, and another one that God raised up, no, the same one, just the word used again. So it is building on what had been done by Hadad the Adomi. So here, again, it's a human being, or 2 human beings in the context. It is reflective of how God's anger gets expressed, right? What's the connection between the angel who is sent Satan and the human beings from foreign power, from foreign countries, so to speak, who are, again, here it's a noun, not a verb. That matters, but I'm not going to fuss too much about it. The answer is, this is the mechanism by which angry God disrupts the plans of the one who God is angry at, Balaam, and here King Solomon. Pretty neat, right? The Satan, one an angel, here human beings, are the vehicle for angry God to get in the way of the person for whom God is angry. I think that's cool. I like that observation. It's there in the text. It's in all of those texts. We're pretty good so far. Yes? Right. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a historical play and a little moment of intertextuality. I think one of the books that isn't read often enough and is a ton of fun is the last book in the Tanakh. I mean that only as somebody reading a table of contents. It's a very, very late book, but it's probably not the latest book. It's a critically important book. The book is the Divrei, I mean, the Book of Chronicles. It is the first retelling of the Bible as a separate literary work. Now, if it wasn't in the Bible itself, it would be celebrated as the first retelling of the biblical story. It would predate, but be in the genre of books like Sefer Hanoch or Sefer Ayovel, the Book of Jubilees or the Book of Enoch, these what are now called intertestamental books or apocryphal books that are retellings of the Bible, but you can't retell the story without making changes to it. And so whereas we look at the apocryphal books that do it and we say, oh my God, they're apocryphal, we look at the Book of Chronicles and we say, gee, it's interesting where these differences are because we're comparing two histories that are both within the Bible itself. But the dating of the Book of Chronicles is closer to these intertestamental books, and there are a bunch of them, than it is to the Book of Samuel's, I mean, certainly the Torah itself, in the Book of Samuel, in the Book of Kings. How did I do on my very brief introduction to the Book of Chronicles? I'm going to trust you guys. We'll see how you do on the test. But it's great. And in that genre of literature, the retelling of biblical narrative, I would argue that the Targumim, which are Aramaic translations, and we call them that, but they're actually more examples in that genre of retelling of the biblical narrative. Some of the best, my opinion, right? Some of the best midrashic collections, rather than being like compendia of midrash, like the Rabbah traditions, all of the Rabbah books, Genesis Rabbah, Exodus Rabbah, Lamentations Rabbah, those are compendia. Those are collections of many little teachings, as opposed to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which to me is like, like the chocolate lava cake or the Cadillac of the genre, is a retelling of the biblical narrative. But the retelling of the biblical narrative, as opposed to the JPS English, right, or the Alter English, or anybody else, who they think are trying to stay as close to the text as possible, the tradition is when we retell the story, we retell it to make it clearer to other people. That means, so you're not confused by what it actually says, I get to tell you what it actually means. And so it's the blending of midrash into narrative, or the additions into narrative. And that's what the Book of Chronicle is. It's just the very first edition of that. Okay? Why do I mention that now? Because this is what I'm about to show. Again, if you're looking on your own screens, you can jump ahead if you want. Is first the older version, the version in Shmuel Bet in the Book of Samuel, about what God does. And then we're going to look at the way that exact story is retold in Chronicles. So here it is. God gets mad at David. Again, the use of this word in the connection of anger and in the connection of God being mad at somebody and doing it. But here God doesn't punish David with a Satan in 2 Samuel 24. Vayosef af Adonai lecharot b'Yisrael. God is mad at the Jews. Sorry. And so he incited David against them. I misspoke in my excitement. The Jewish people are both the origin and the target of God's anger. And David is the vehicle for God to deliver God's anger to the Jewish people. Right? Vayaset et David bahem. And God sets David upon them. Kind of fun. Little pun from Hebrew to English, saying, Lech minei et Yisrael vet Yehuda. Go and do a census for them, count them. Okay? So why is that a bad thing? Why? The point I want to make is God is angry, and God sends David as sort of being the instrument to create the problem or whatnot, the punishment that God would. No Satan there at all. Are you with me so far? So the author of the Book of Chronicles seemingly is unhappy that God is the one who does that. It doesn't say that David sins, right? In the same way that it doesn't say that Pharaoh decides not to do X, Y, or C, right? We're just finished or about to finish the narrative, of the 10 plagues. We'll get, firstborn death. But God hardens Pharaoh's heart. It's not Pharaoh's fault. And it interesting, we could look carefully at the 10 plague narrative and ask that question and whatever else. And God tells us why God does it in the Exodus narrative and so forth. Here too, God makes David go do this because God is angry and this is a bad thing and it's going to allow for God to punish them. This is the story. By the way, I just have to enjoy. This is, as opposed to everything else that is A and B, this is the same story. It's just in two different books. So I've done it. You'll appreciate it as A and A prime. It's not A and B. These aren't different texts. These are the same story. One in the older account from Shmuel Bet and one from First Chronicles. Right? I don't know. I think that's funny. Not just the editorial comment that the first one is that God did it. And the second one is, nah, let's blame Satan. So same story. Again, you can read 1 Chronicles 21. You can go back and read 2 Samuel 24. Vayamot Satan al Yisrael. In the God sent or rose up, God brought up, God lifted up. I don't know what that God stood up. A Satan against Israel and incited David to number Israel. Right? Samuel says God was mad and God incited David against Israel. The author of Chronicles said, no. It was a Satan or the Satan or Satan or that did that work. So are we good? But appreciate what it means, right? The first point is the author of the retelling of the story does not like the idea that God is guilty of making David do something that will bring punishment. Now, God does punishment all over the place. So it's not just punishing God, but that God incited David to do the census and then will be punished for it. The author of Chronicles doesn't like that. So the author of Chronicles takes it out of God's hands, and instead of blaming God for doing that, says, no, it was Satan. What does that mean? I'm not totally clear. We are in a stage of development. Exactly what do but it's not God. Satan gets blamed. Why did David do the census? 2 Samuel? Because God was pissed, and that's the way God brought punishment to David and the Jewish people. In the eyes of Chronicles, Satan made him do it, right? Satan is the one who made David do the thing. Satan is the cause, and it is exactly the action that God does in Shmuel Bet.
Why is it a punishment to do the census?
It's a neat question. We can go and look at it in, again, better to look at it in 2 Samuel to have it. There are ways in which it's not totally clear. Let's see if we have time at the end, if I may.
Of course.
Okay.
Is this the first time that Satan appears as an entity? I don't want to say human, but an entity, and not a verb or an idea of an adversarial position, whatever. Is this the first time it appears? Vaya'amod Satan, meaning that he took action on his own, initiating or whatever, as an entity, as a creature.
Good. So I hear two parts to there. I hear the main question that you're asking is this the first time that this word seems to be the name or the title of a thing rather than accusing a person of being a that or some person? And it is the first one on my source sheet on the top of page 6. It is a later text, certainly than, again, Satan's not used in Shmuel Bet. It's a later text than the King's text. It's a later text than the Genesis text. It's a later text than the Numbers text. It's a later text than the Ezra text. So for the first, all of the prior texts, those 5 pages, this is later and later in the development. This text, the texts that I think are going to be the most interesting, and I'm not there yet, but will lead us into next week, are going to be Zechariah and going to be some Psalms. Chronicles is probably after Zechariah, and the Psalms, the only way to date most of the Psalms is really problematic, because you say, oh, these themes in the Psalms were important at this time period. But as to, getting a more nuanced dating of it, sometimes you can do it by vocabulary. But we'll get to those Psalms. So this is by far the newest text that we have done. It, one, makes Satan into a character, and seemingly not human. There's nothing about this that makes me think that the use of Satan in Chronicles is a human being or referring to a human being the way we saw it in earlier texts. And two, it's what I might put in the category of let God off the hook text. Yeah, Lynn?
If you look back, though, at the Balaam story and at the story of Solomon, that God was angry with him and sent these Satan figures, could it have been understood by the time of Chronicles that Satan was some sort of agent of God, or some sort of attribute of a displeasure of God, that use of that word was that way?
It's an outstanding question, and that was the second part that was in what Ruti said. So Ruti, and the part that I focused on was, is this Satan now like its own thing? And the other one is this an independent thing or an extension of God's will or whatever? And I think the correct answer from First Chronicles is I don't know.
Or an editorial of chronicler, because anything that David does is good and wonderful and righteous.
Well, for the stories, David is caused to do wrong. The question is whether he's pushed to do it by God or pushed to do it by Satan.
So I think it's less getting God off the hook. I mean, again, the story is getting God off the hook, but I think the underlying editorial sense or flavor of Chronicles is David is righteous. So everything, I mean, the whole story of Bathsheba disappeared from Chronicles.
Right. So
you don't go any further trying to whitewash David than completely forgetting the whole story of Bathsheba.
Again.
So here too, I don't think the stress so much is getting God off the hook as getting David to be the epitome of good, because this is what Chronicles is all about.
So from
David is it.
From my only comment to that is from Shmuel to Chronicles. In this instant, David does exactly the same thing. Literally, Vayaset et David bahem lemor lechmenen Vayaset et David limnot et Yisrael. So it's pretty damn close to the and in the other piece, I don't know the answer. I don't know if I would presume that the chronicler, the author of Chronicle, is just part of their worldview, their cosmology, that Satan only operates as directed by God, which is what we're going to see in Job, or whether in Chronicles is newer than Job, we think, or do we have here kind of a manifestation of an independent Satan? And I'm stuck. I don't know. I have no intelligent insight into that comment, because I'm arguing from silence, right? It doesn't tell me what the relationship is. All right, Jonah?
Just so from this point forward, do we drop the definite article of a Satan or several Satans and just address it as though it were a person?
So this point forward, is that a comment about historically or a comment about my source sheet?
I guess historically.
Okay. And there are people who really want to look at the marker of the definite article, whatever it's called, the as being really definitive in the development from Hasatan to Satan. But notice that we have lots of examples without the hey, right? So the hey, there's no capital letters in Hebrew. I can't write without capital letters in English. So, the Satan and Satan with a capital S are already both in a different category than when God sends Hadad as a Satan against Shlomo. That's not a capital S, right? That is a category of people who are a pain in the neck, whatever that exact category is that God sends. So some people, I wonder if without my notes, if I looked at the bibliography, if I could highlight, because I don't think it's in the title of any of those articles, some people make a real big fuss about it. We're going to look at some more texts and you can decide what you think in terms of what else we're looking at. We're good? Okay. The next thing that I want to do is a little bit of a side shuffle, and I want to look at some of the themes that I think are interesting, maybe to prompt those who are interested in more formal study, maybe just to fill my need to try and cover some of these things that we're not going to spend a lot of time on. One, another series that I would love to do has to do with populating the heavens. Okay? Whole side note. I love that the biblical word for skies is in the plural. I love that I can speak in English and call the skies rather than the sky, though in English the singular works. And I like in English, I can not only use skies, I can use heavens, right? So the plural still works in English, but for both sky and heaven, skies and heavens, the plural works as well, the singular or the plural. The population of the skies, not the way my experience of most classically religiously oriented people today know that the heavens can't be above us. That has to be metaphoric because we've been very high up in the skies, and we've had birds go through jet engines, but we've never had angels go through jet engines. So I've been on top of Mount Olympus. We have been the religions that believe in God's kingdom above have had to learn to understand that in kind of a Marvel Comics multi-dimensional way, because it can't be the vertical metaphor anymore, because I just spent 5.5 hours at 34,000 feet. And, I didn't see nothing that spiritual up there. But our ancestors did. Our ancestors saw a sky that was populated by supernatural beings. And they saw it in the sky itself. They saw it in the stars. They saw it in the sun and moon. They saw it in all of the inexplicable phenomena that they could see with their eyes, none of which were Chinese drones. I'm confident. And that's a great one. It's a great topic to try and understand from Genesis, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu, let us make the human being in our likeness, to variety of references in the book of Psalms to kind of the divine kingdom, to all of those who are around the royal throne. There's a whole lot that's there. First Kings is a brief text taking a look at that. And it says, I had to use blue because the word Satan doesn't appear anywhere here. So I didn't get to use my red Satan text. But the text is verse 19. Listen to God. I can just do it in English. I call upon you to hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord seated upon his throne. Another text that says you can see God. We have a bunch of texts that says you can't see God, or to say it differently, you can, it will just kill you. And a bunch of texts that say you can see God. We are not. Don't let anybody ever make Judaism into a monovocal thing. It just doesn't happen. All right. So here's a text that says that at least some people can see God, and with God, with V'chol tzva shamayim omer alav v'mino u'mismalo, and all of the army of the heavens. I like that better than host of heaven. They are soldiers, warriors. They are not just, they're not inviting you to dinner like a host, and they're not just people there. It's V'chol tzva hashamayim, and it's not singular heaven. All of the armies of heavens, or the army of heavens, standing in attendance to God, to the right and to the left of God. Why do I highlight this text? And we're not going to read any more of it. Because positionality in the divine realm matters to God's right and to God's left. I would love to do all kinds of astronomy stuff, but I would need to spend a year with an astronomer preparing it because I don't feel qualified to do the science side of it. Usually I'm better on the science. In that case, I'm better on the biblical stuff. But positionality in the divine realm matters. So the placement of, who is at God's right hand? Here, all of the armies of heaven are laid out, are splayed out to God's right and to God's left, standing there, by God's throne. This is like an impressive thing. This is like a scene in Gladiator, or a clean scene in Spartacus before the revolt, or probably in Henry IV. I don't know. Right? This is the heavenly. This is God's ruling chamber. Is there a better word for that? And positionality. All of the lowercase lords, all of the earls and dukes and whatever are laid out to God's right and to God's left. Yes? So that's an image that we'll come back to. We'll see exactly on which stories about who stands where up in heaven. This text doesn't use, this next text doesn't use Satan, but it is the origin text. We've got a couple of them. This is the older one from 1st Isaiah of a shooting star. Now here it's not talking about the devil. It's not talking about the angel. We can look in the context in Isaiah 14, but Ech nafalta mishamayim. This is about the fall of the Jewish people, not original sin and not Lucifer. Christianity has people falling all the time. Lucifer fell, Adam and Eve fell. It's like the early Christians were clumsy and kept tripping on their sandals or something. Everybody's falling. What's this falling stuff? But it's a biblical image. They don't fall in the garden. I'm pretty sure that verb is not used anywhere in the opening Genesis narrative. But there are places, this being one, where falling is a literary motif. David and Jonathan, right? Ech naflu, hagiburim. I don't think I'm close. How the mighty have fallen is the text over there. Here is about Hillel Beid Shachar, this morning star. Morning star, I think, is from the other text, but oh, bright star, Jewish people, how much I used to like you, but now God's really pissed and you are diminished in God's sight. That's what Isaiah means to say, but poetic. How you have fallen from the skies, O shining one, O son of the morning light. How you have fallen to earth, you who should be the conqueror of nations. Once you said in your heart, I will climb to the sky higher than all the stars, meaning all the divine beings that serve God. I will put my throne up there. I will, Tower of Babel story flavor. I will sit in the assembly of the gods. That's how great we could have been or thought we were. On the summit of Tzafon, the great mountain up in the north, I will mount the back of a cloud. I will match God Almighty. Instead, you are brought down to Sheol. You have gone down to the pit, to Sheol. That's in verse, you can't see me point there, but Achel Sheol Turad, El Yarkete Bor, to the very corners or bottom of the pit. They who behold you stare, they peer at you closely. Is this the man who shook the earth, who made realms tremble, who made the world like a waste and wrecked its town, who never released his prisoners to their homes? Okay, in Isaiah, go look in the context, Isaiah is condemning the Jewish people. He is saying, you who could have been, you could have been a contender. You who had greatness, right? And you thought that you could ascend and really be greater than the angels or the minor gods or the other celestial beings and sit right there. But look at how you have fallen, right? Look at how terrible it is. So this piece when Lynn mentioned fall in Lucifer as morning star, this is, as is not uncommon, this is the Hebrew biblical text that will be reapplied to create that narrative. So save the question of, do Jews ever use it to create that narrative? That'll be a topic that you can ask me in 2 weeks. Don't ask me now because it's not biblical. All right? Are we
Rabbi,
good?
I have a comment on
Maria? Yep.
the paragraph before about the placement.
Left
That's
and right?
also, yeah, that's also a very Christian thing. God sits on the throne, and to the right there's Jesus, to the left there's like all these different things.
So some of what I'm doing here,
Yeah.
and again, we'll get to whether or not they appear or whether or not I can find them in rabbinic literature, is our sacred books are also their sacred books.
But they didn't edit it, right? Because the genealogy of Jesus was altered to align with their narrative.
So again, we continue to read our sacred books in the ways in which we read them, and Christians continue to read. I did a whole piece this morning to try and help people understand why the Hebrew Bible is not the Old Testament. And in fairness, why the Old Testament is not the Hebrew Bible. I have no problem that there is an Old Testament, but the Old Testament is a Christian set of books that happen to be essentially the same books as the Jewish Bible, but they're in a different order and they mean different things and they're read through different lenses. They're read through Christian lenses. So I want to give you some of the texts that are part of both the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, that are part of our tradition, but that it's clear the way in which Christianity, because you know more about what Christianity will develop in the Satan narrative than you do so far about what our ancestors did. But we'll get there in the next couple of weeks. Ruti, I see a hand up.
Question, did I understand correctly that you said that Isaiah 14 talking about Hillel ben Shachar is a prophecy against Israel? Did I misunderstand you? He's clearly talking about the king of Babylon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hillel ben Shachar is clearly, I mean, the whole prophecy
Yes.
is about the aspirations or the greatness, the presumed greatness of the king of Babylon, and Isaiah is clearly talking to him. He says it very clearly in those opening verses. In verse Venasata המשל הזה, on verse, what is it, 4? And you shall take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how has the oppressor ceased?
Thank you.
And so on and so forth. It's against the Babylonian
Yes.
king and not about Israel.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I got all excited about the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, but Hillel ben Shachar is a little bit, I mean, for anybody who studied Isaiah for years and years and years, saying that Hillel ben Shachar talks about Israel is kind of taking it into a different direction. Yeah. Isaiah has other things to say about us, but not this one.
Thank you. And in fact, well, I don't go far enough. It's later in the chapter. Thank you. All right, other thoughts? Are you waving at me, Allison? I don't know what, are you saying goodbye? I think she just said goodbye. I guess I do understand her hand signals. Oh, hello, Stella. I didn't see Stella before.
Same with the next one. Negid Tzor.
So the Ezekiel text, later than first Isaiah text, for me is important because it has two pieces to it. One is this, it's a text about a man who would be God or a lesser being who would be God, which is going to play into a Christian narrative. And two, it is associated with what in the text of Ezekiel reads as Daniel, which the tradition reads as Daniel, and a reference to a Babylonian mythological or folk hero figure that is important, that it is the dominant character in our book of Daniel, which 2nd century before the Common Era, but as a form of pseudepigrapha, pretends to be written by a hero from a previous age, and has lots and lots of heavenly angelic images throughout the book. So Ezekiel 28 both gives us a sense of fighting against or revolting or doing battle with God, trying to become enthroned, trying to become king of the universe, and puts it in a context of conversation with Daniel, that'll be really, really important a couple centuries later to the author or authors of that book, and talking about all of the stumim, all of the secrets, all of the hidden things that are present in that book, and so on and so forth. Okay? So again, Ben Adam, mortals in conflict with or wanting to supplant God, and its connection to Daniel or to Daniel. Yes, good. Again, though the human who would try to ascend will be cast down again into the pit. So this image of thrown down, which will continue to evolve. For the record, it's really cool evolution is into Christianity. They have more fun with the battle and thrown into the pit, I think. A big fan of the fun of the book of Revelation. And then Ezekiel's mystical vision of this world and this idea that of some kind of holy and pure, wondrous, shining, beautiful, wise, and verse 13, that whoever Ezekiel is talking to was in the Garden of Eden. Okay? So in Christianity, that will conflate Satan with the serpent. That won't happen in Judaism. But Satan will be in the garden, but Satan will not be the serpent. But the Ezekiel text is the source text for that part of the mythology of so much of this has that Satan, great angel, thrown into the pit, gorgeous and glorious and shining and wise. And the text of Be'eden Gan Elohim Hayita, that you were in the Garden of Eden, this who will be cast down. So we're going to come back to that. But already when I say that, most of us, I think, have enough, what do we call it, Goyesha experience or Goyesha awareness, that if I'm talking about Satan and the text says that he's in the garden or was in the garden, it's in the past tense, that we conflate. So don't do that. What I'm going to show you is Satan is not the serpent in the garden in rabbinic lore, but the Ezekiel prophecy is, or the image is fulfilled. Satan, I'll show you Jewish Satan in the garden and what he does in the garden, because he does a couple of really funky, cool things. I like Satan. So Jewish folklore, Jewish teachings will fulfill this as Satan in the garden, but he won't be the snake. Get it out of your head right now. Christianity makes it easier. Satan is the snake. It all goes from there. Yeah, Ruti?
Can you roll up a little bit? So which Yechezkel are you quoting here?
28.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, same
Just
chapter.
edited the chapter a bit.
Thank you. They're having
Here
a lot,
again in the last verse, the idea of throwing down.
they're having a lot of fun with it, both Isaiah and Ezekiel, of the higher they rise or the higher they aspire to be, the lower I'll drop them or I'll throw them or I'll put them in the pit, as if we invented it, you know, the idea of how high can people or
Correct.
whatever try to aspire, the more fun it will be to see them falling. Yeah.
And the motivation for that rise or for that attended rise, as opposed to for rebellion's sake, in the Isaiah text, we have the "you would be as God" or whatever exactly the text is. Here, your arrogance or your haughtiness is related to your sense of your own beauty. They say splendor in verse in the English. You debased your wisdom. Oh no, they just say beauty. Sorry, you grew haughty because of your beauty and debased your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. So just lovely, condemning the vanity of the image here in Ezekiel 28. Now, I want to acknowledge it's exactly 8:30, which I'm just cracking myself up. The next stuff, I don't really know what I want to do with it, but we don't have time to do it next week because there's so much other stuff we have to accomplish next week. And we don't have time now to do it more fully. So I'm going to do the highlights. If this was a graduate level seminar, I don't think I could even do it in a 300 level seminar. And I'm not sure how doable it is in the English, to be honest, but I think it is doable in the English. I have a series of 3 Psalms here. Psalm 38, Psalm 71, and Psalm 109, somewhere down here. Psalm 109 of the 3 is the only one that has Satan all over it. Again, it's a relatively long psalm, 31 verses, but 4 times, 3 times as a verb and once as a noun, we get Satan. Again, just to highlight here in verse 6, you can check me in English. Satan is standing on the right side, on the yamin, on the right, not the correct side. But so this idea of positionality in the heavenly court matters, and it's here explicitly. But my contention, the book of Job is a late book. The imageries and ideas there, and it's a book that takes an old myth and attaches to it, and that's the short part of the book. It's the first chapter and a half and the last bit, and adds to it 40 additional chapters that are mostly Job's friends arguing with him, and then a couple of chapters at the end, God saying, "Don't whine to me, I am really powerful and cool." These 3 Psalms have within them so much of those ideas, but in a poetic context, not in that context. And one of them, Psalm 109, has Satan, 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 literally 4 times within it. So if you wanna, I would encourage you to, if you know nothing about Job, don't bother trying to do your homework. It's not going to be doable. Maybe I'll pick out some of the highlights to start there next Thursday night. I haven't decided for sure, but I'm trying to think about, I know there are 14 pages here, and we kind of successfully read about 8.5 or 9 of them, so that's not bad. But to read through these Psalms and to see the images that are spread across those 42 chapters of Job that are here in poetic older form. Okay, so that methodology, I would call it an intertextual moment where I think clearly the author of the book of Job knows these Psalms and is using the language and imagery of the Psalms to do what the author of Job wants to do. Again, next week is not really about Job, it's still about Satan, but about development. So if you would like to, I've given them to you in Hebrew and in English, 3 Psalms. Psalm 38, where to start? 38, 71, and 109. And I'm happy to start there next Thursday night for people who either want to share what they found and some ideas. We could do an hour and a half on those 3 Psalms easy, but we'll at least start there for things that you find and of interest, and maybe I'll offer a few of my own remarks from those 3 Psalms. All right? And then I think it's the last text. Good. 14 pages. My memory's not so good. I got to remember where I go. One of the very late biblical texts is the prophet Zechariah. What I think is really neat about the prophet Zechariah is every other really late text, in the tradition, the men of the great assembly, but those who helped define our tradition, they sniffed out that they were really quite different, and they didn't put them in the prophecy section of the Bible. They put them in the third section, the Ketuvim, the hagiography in funky Greek, but the later writings. So a book like Daniel, the people just read it and all the time tell me it's a 6th century book, and they're wrong. It's a 2nd century book, and our ancestors sniffed that out.
Zechariah Hasatan is not red.
Say it again.
In Zechariah, Hasatan is not red. How come? Red, R-E-D.
Yeah, because I missed it.
Oh, okay.
Because part of this was done on an airplane. I mean, I got a whole variety of excuses.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's and because I wasn't sure I was going to do this one, like, doesn't really fit in this week, and it doesn't fit in next week. So I'm going to give it to you with a couple of comments, and we'll go from there. Right here, you said 3
and 4. Vayomer Adonai LaSatan. The 4th line. Yeah, here. Good. Thank you. Okay.
That A is the footnote A of JPS. It just is the way that it copies things. So what's really interesting to me is that Zechariah makes it into the book of 12, into the 12 small prophets. Just interesting to think about how some of the books get placed in the way that they get placed. Whereas Job doesn't make it as a prophetic book, and Daniel doesn't make it as a prophetic book, and Zechariah is very late. I must be missing one. Oh, here.
Yeah.
Just to be thorough. So there's an image in the prophet Zechariah, which is an image of on high, and Satan is standing in that image. And the high priest, a guy by the name of Joshua, is in dirty clothes. And the story is beginning here, God telling Joshua, take a bath and clean yourself up, you're the high priest. So it is an appearance of the same character who appears in the opening 2 chapters of Job. I think that's reasonable and clear. What it's doing here, people argue about it all the time. It seems to me that the presence of Hasatan in chapter 3 of Zechariah is related to the inappropriateness or the disqualified nature of, or the dirty of, the filthy in JPS English, of the high priest, of Joshua. And the text is about cleaning or purifying, getting rid of Satan, as it were, to do it. So what Satan is actually doing there in the role that he plays, again, notice positionality. He's standing to the right of Joshua as he does up above to the right of God. Again, for those who are interested, I'm happy to share with you a number of articles and different theories. The high priest who goes to work in dirty clothes is supposed to be put to death, right? So anyway, there's a whole lot there. I have no good, deep piece to it, but that's why I saved it for the end, to be able to give it to everybody. And for those who would like to, I encourage you. Again, you can even just can you make a verb out of it? You can Wikipedia Zechariah, and you will get some ideas and some footnotes there. Again, the bibliography has articles. I haven't linked the articles to that document, but I guess I can do that for those who want to. But email me and tell me you'd like to read those articles, and I'll email them to you and whatever else. But this is one that you should know, even if I don't claim to understand it very well and don't have a whole lot to say. So what we have just done, by way of quick review, by background to the character of Satan, is we have done a nearly exhaustive look at the presence of that word in the biblical text as a place name, as a noun and a verb related to being oppositional or being in the way of or being an obstacle towards. We have seen the way that it is used as kind of a category of person, and that people can be that. Even King David can be thought of as that, as Satan or a Satan or the Satan, or however one says that into English, as an obstacle. That the term itself in much of the biblical text is morally neutral. That is, the thing that is an obstacle, it could be good because it gets in the way of somebody trying to do bad, or it could be bad because it gets in the way of somebody trying to do good. And then towards the end, we looked at some of the later prophetic images where, with its association to some kind of heavenly being, we did a little detour into not so much Satan, but images that, especially in Christianity, will be important because they'll merge with the image of Satan, that is, fallen angel thrown down to the pit, and those sorts of images. And then we ended by my giving you 3 Psalms that I didn't read, that I think are the background imagery that will be incorporated into the book of Job. And then I ended with Zechariah, which is the other mention of the Satan as being an angelic figure who appears, and just not one that I can make a lot of sense out of or whatever else, but it's there, and to be educated, you should know that it's there. Questions, comments, thoughts about this? In some ways is the most rigorous, and this stuff is a ton of fun for me. But for those who are looking for devil stories, and if today was a little bit wonkish and a little bit too much like class and a little bit too much of talking about Satan as a noun and Satan as a verb and looking at the word, again, not everybody is wired the same way. Give it, next week will be fun from where I sit. If you make it through the prerequisite first 2 weeks, I may bring in Midrash next week to supplement the Job stuff. So next week may also really get to what I think is fun stuff. This is fun stuff to me intellectually and is really serious learning. The other stuff is also fun intellectually, is also serious learning, but then it's like really cool stuff because we get to do sex. It's never in any of my classes if we don't do smut. We get to do the narrative of Satan as a figure and the role that Satan plays. We get to do a lot of cool stuff that's really, really there. But it's either 2 weeks or a week and a half of background to get there. Thoughts, comments, reactions, questions? Yvette.
I see you rushing through things because you've set this into 5 weeks and there are lots of other places you'd like to go with it. Is there a reason we're limited to 5 weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. No, please God, we have lots and lots of time. I have discovered, and Yvette, you and I have shared this as an experience in the Slow Read Book Club, that the pacing of things is sometimes hard to figure out. There have been books that we have read 1 chapter at a time that we have loved through 7 weeks, but the book took 17 weeks. And so I don't know. There is enough material here to do years. I mean, I will show you here. Let me go back to without overly tilting my hand, my Satan lecture outlines. There's the ad. Thank you, Ellie, for making the lovely ad for it. This is my quick outlines for some of this stuff. This is the Talmudic material. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's only part of it. I've got more of it down here. That's still rabbinic material, right? But here it has the Shabbat piece because it's related to the Zohar piece. There is so much fun stuff that is here. Again, I'm
I wanted you
surprised.
to have the freedom to do what you really wanted.
Let's see where it goes. Again, we can decide. We can get through five of these and decide that we want to focus on some piece of it. Or again, it just takes the right Satan whispering in my ear. And all of a sudden, 22 years of never having taught Satan at the synagogue, it's a 5-part series. So, the right Satan whispers in my ear. Maybe we do read Milton Satan next, because it's not a very long book and it's fantastic. And it's worth reading. It's really, if you don't know it or you haven't read it, in 20, 30, 40 years since you read it in college, it's worth rereading. I've read it twice. So I would read it again. I had a wonderful moment. I only mention it because he is in a great funk at the moment, because it turns out our world may be headed to Satan's home, because it feels that way to a whole lot of people. I'm just saying. So he is my friend, Professor Dr. Andrew Charman. He's a physicist at Berkeley. He's a brilliant and wonderful guy. He grew up in San Diego, went to La Jolla High. He and I have known each other since the 80s. I won't speak for him. I love him. You can ask him what he thinks of me. We lived together in college. I go on and on, but we are like, opposite spin quarks. As much as we have in common are made out of exactly the same stuff, somehow it lines up differently. It's Andy, who I used to go and sit in bookstores with until midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning, like you can only do in Cambridge. And when we would walk out, I would be elated because I looked at 20 different books and read like the introduction or a couple of pages. Oh my God, to learning in this world, there is no end or limit until you're no longer in this world. Like that you will never exhaust it. And Andy would walk out of the bookstore like every Saturday night. And I would say, do you realize in my lifetime, I don't think I will even read every book in this bookstore. And it's one bookstore in Cambridge. And I would be smiling and elated and skipping. And Andy would, with complete perfect depression, would say, oh, in my whole lifetime, I won't even get through this one bookstore. And again, he's not a depressed person. He's wonder guy and whatever else. But and Ruti's been pointing this out for a while now. Summers are always slow. I defend my summers to walk away and do other things. I just called Lynn Satan. Did I really do that? Lynn, did I call you Satan? Jillian just accused me of calling you Satan. If I did, that's so cool.
My face.
That is so cool. I have to go back and play the recording and see if I did that. I wasn't aware that I did that. Because you whispered in my ear. Yes.
Yeah.
I did. I absolutely did. Jillian's right. I did. Whispering in my ear and whispering in my ear. So summers get slow. And this year, for whatever reasons, however it happened, the fall, I have not been responsible for a whole lot of good learning at the synagogue. I'm not sure how that happened, but I will own it. And I miss it. And these 5 pieces are a start to that. And whether we do a major shift, I have a limited amount of time. It would be way cool if I could do like 5 different classes every week, and I would have a ton of fun doing and, but there's some limit to time. So we're doing this. Slow Read Book Club starts tomorrow. Einstein's Rabbi or whatever, Naomi Levy, right? Naomi Levy?
Einstein
Whatever her
and
book
the
is.
Rabbi.
Say it again?
Einstein and the Rabbi.
Yeah, that one. And we're going to get through the first 3 chapters, which is about 25 pages. And there's lunch and learn on Saturday. This happens to be a good string. And there are movies on Sunday. I don't think there's any formal learning. I mean, there's religious school, but for us. But tonight.
What's the lunch?
What did you say, Al?
What is the lunch and learn on?
It'll be something related to J-Dame. I haven't fully planned it out yet. I'll do it tomorrow. But we're in the context of the month of February, and it is a brilliant, brilliant subject to think about and to study in a different way. We've already done a lunch and learn, and I heard that Rabbi Julia Watts-Belzer was brilliant and wonderful. I'm sorry that I missed it on Sunday. And lots more good things. So Yvette, we'll see where we go from here after these 5. Yeah, family movie night in Havdalah. There are movies on Saturday night that I think 2 movies everybody's invited to. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Rabbi, please can you, this is Stella, repeat the name of the book you mentioned?
Einstein and the Rabbi.
No, before
Paradise
that,
Lost.
Oh, Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
it's a
you.
great book. It is such a beautiful image. And again, maybe we need to put together a totally inappropriate group of adults and watch the television show, Sue, especially the last season. The last season has more of other pieces to it that are really, really interesting. Ruchi's not coming to that.
Because I've watched it and I've had it. Okay, fine. Hollywood does very interesting things with Lucifer. Great. So yeah, I enjoyed it very much when I watched it. Not to repeat whatever. What I want to comment is that I think that being able to do what you did with taking us on this whirlwind survey of what it starts as and how it ended, I think it's amazing, and it's just, it takes the wind out of every single, I think Yvette kind of hinted at it, and you said it too, every single one of those quotes and every single one of those things that you brought can be a basis for at least something much more expansive. So it's wonderful that you succeeded in taking us through this. I mean, seriously, it's a roller coaster. I could see Jeannie was sitting there with a smile on her face the whole time. It was one of the things that was so joyful. You said it's fun for you to do it, and I think you conveyed it very clearly in the way that you presented it. So it was really fun.
Thank you. And I think we're going to cover fewer pages next week. And I'm kind of petrified at the number of pages I'm going to want to cover in the 3rd week. So we'll see exactly how it plays out and whatever else. I'm going to try.
I'm so afraid of asking us to read in advance.
Well, no.
People who want to read, people who can't will come to class and do whatever it is that it takes.
So for next week, I know in a world of limitless time and all conscientious students, I know for your sake, engage the 3 Psalms, 38, 71, and 109. 1. 2, definitely read carefully the first 2 chapters of Job, which is where the Satan stuff appears. Maybe also read the last couple of chapters because it's not the Satan stuff, but it's really important to the Job stuff. We'll see. I don't know. You can read the whole book.
No, you can't.
You can. And then the question is, at what moment have I finally decided for sure what I want to go through so that the source sheet is available to you? And we will send an email letting you know, either just including the source sheet or that it's on the website or whatever else. That will be the last decision. Again, 3 Psalms you have, the opening of Job you can find on Sefaria or in a book. And then, I may do some midrashic stuff next time because the Job parallel to the midrash of Abraham. So when we do the biblical stuff, Satan or the Satan is actually in Job, but the midrash will take that character centuries later and place him into the Abraham story, which is really, really neat. So we may do some midrash stuff, or at least put it in the source sheet, whether or not we actually talk about it. All right, Yeli bought me yogurt. I would feel disrespectful to my daughter if I didn't go eat the frozen yogurt that she bought me. Thank you guys very, very much. I had a ton of fun. Thank you for making it the end. I hope you had fun too.
Thank you a lot.
As things percolate.
It was amazing.
Ooh, you know what I want you to do? And then we've lost a couple people. If everybody will, whether you do it to everybody or just to me, if you will put your email address or a good email address, if you want, into the chat window. If you don't want to share with everybody, just do it as a private chat to me. That's an option in Zoom. then I'll put together the list, and if people send me ideas and thoughts and reflections, maybe I will forward them to the group, and we'll go from there. Because it would be awfully great if you guys, it would give me the teacher jollies if I happened to walk into a Starbucks and saw some combination of 2 or 3 or 4 of you sitting there being like, no, Psalm 38 doesn't have that piece in it. Psalm 38 or some other piece. So my hope is that the ideas that we talk about stick with people and percolate and develop, and we don't have lots of opportunities to go backwards. So share them with each other or share them with me, and we'll go from there.
Why don't you plug the Tehillim, the Psalms class?
So Wednesday mornings do we move the time of that, or is it still at 11? I'm confused. It's a ton of fun to read a psalm a week with a good group of people who read it mostly as literature with some language and some other pieces. We've already passed Psalm 38. For this Wednesday, it's Psalm number 50, because we did 49. It's Psalm number 50. Show up in the same Zoom room at 11 o'clock. Some people do it from their desk at work and are only half present. In the old days, some people used to do it that way. And it's really fun. It is really fun to read things as a group. Pretty much that's what we do at Readings with the Rabbi and at Slow Read Book Club and at Satan and at Psalms and at Lunch and Learn. We just read stuff together, and you do that with nice, intelligent, interesting people with diverse learnings and diverse knowledge, and cool things happen. It's not rocket science. All right, maybe I'll do a lecture on rocket science at some point. I got to go eat my yogurt. Good night.
Thank you so
Rabbi.
much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
בתיאבון, תודה.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.